moving us right into formative assessment. So this question is asking you what formative assessment is. There's three different definitions provided for formative assessment. So go ahead and match which one you think best fits what formative assessment is. All right, great. It looks like the majority of you went with the final answer, which was conducted during the program to monitor student learning. That is the one that most closely identifies to what formative assessment is. Though I will say I did put a little bit of trickery in here because technically formative assessment can also be conducted before the learning experience to set some sort of a benchmark for the session for that day. So I threw a little bit of a loop in there for you all. We're going to get a little bit further into formative assessment now. And to start us off, you're probably wondering, why should I engage in formative assessment practices? So I want to start there. So the author of the book Minds Online Teaching Effectively, which was written by Michelle Miller, and she really argues that communication is incredibly important component to successful online teaching. And I'm focusing in that area knowing just the state in which we are all at right now. She really encourages and thoroughly elaborates, quite frankly, that in order for an online course to be successful, interactions must be two-way. So what does that mean, right? So two-way is that students not only need guidance about how to navigate the course, but instructors also need feedback about how the class is going. So that is absolutely where formative assessment comes in. This is going to provide for us that feedback to know how a course is going without us constantly asking students if they get it. And in person, I have taught a class before, and I know in my early years, I would ask if I was kind of getting through to students, and I would look out at a sea of blank faces. So I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but hopefully some of the techniques we talk about today will help to alleviate that and help us to understand better our students. So here is a quote about formative assessment, and it reads, all those activities undertaken by teachers and or their students which provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching and learning activities in which they are engaged. So really, it's essentially a way to leverage assessment in the moment. This is how we are going to be able to make data-driven decisions pretty instantaneously. The active assessment will measure learning, but it's also going to provide us as teachers, or you all as teachers, I should say, with diagnostic information to help you really understand the student's strengths and weaknesses while thinking about attaining proficiency. So, like anything else, there is a flip side to formative assessment, and that is summative assessment. So, I want to take a second and just appropriately define both of them. So formative, which is what we're focusing on today, is conducted during the program. It is used to monitor student learning. Its true purpose is to provide feedback to the instructor and also to the student, and it's used to shape, modify, or improve a program right now. Now, summative, so the flip side of formative, right? It's conducted after the program. It is used to evaluate student learning and makes judgment on quality, worth, or compares to a standard. It can also be incorporated into future plans. I want to take a pause right here. Um, a lot of people, especially when I'm on site, we get stuck in this formative and summative and thinking about examples of each one. And of course, we're going to get to those today. But I always try to think about it in the term of course evaluation. So during a course, and we have a student for a certain number of weeks in the course experience, we can conduct formative assessment throughout that course to identify what students need to catch up on, to identify what practices or theories or content isn't getting through to our students, to help identify throughout the course whether or not student learning outcomes for the course are being met. That's formative. Summative in a course is that course evaluation that goes out, the student responds, and there isn't much we can do once we get those responses back. We might see that in those summative moments, students, wished we would have done a different teaching method, or it would have resonated better with them if we had done X, Y, or Z, or potentially that they don't feel that they met the learning outcomes that were set. Summative is helpful. Course evaluations are helpful. We can still make improvements to our course for the next term, but we cannot go back and help the students in that course to who provided the course evaluations, to help them make improvements so that they are successful in that course. So that's just how I like to think about it and align my brain to that formative and summative. Now, in starting to think about formative assessment, I want to take a second and I want to start by talking about student motivation in an online course. And I want to start specifically by talking through the community of inquiry framework. It's also known as the COI, potentially something you all have heard of or worked within before. But the model is really a social learning process, and it focuses on an online as well as blended environment, so that online and face-to-face kind of environment that's happening coincide or at the same time in certain instances. So this model or this framework really represents a process of creating a deep and meaningful collaborative, but also constructive learning experience through the development of three interdependent elements. So you're seeing them here: teaching presence, social presence, and cognitive presence. Now, this framework is built upon three dimensions. As you can see here, it's kind of outlined, and I'm going to go through each one. So first, the teaching presence, which is going to be at the top, is defined as the design, facilitation, and direction of cognitive and social processes for the realization of meaningful learning. So that's a lot, but it involves three main areas. So it really involves instructional design and organization of the course and activities. It focuses on facilitation of the course and activities, and then finally direct instruction. So really the teaching presence. So the setting of the curriculum, for example, or sharing personal meaning and focusing on discussions. Now, the second ring here, social presence, refers to the ability to perceive others in an online environment as real. So this can be difficult at times, right? When we're trying to connect with others in a over the internet using technology, just as we're doing now, right? It's sometimes hard to create that connection, but that social presence and that engagement with participants is really important. We should be trying to encourage collaboration. We should be encouraging feedback and interaction. And of course, in thinking about social presence, it really involves open communication, expression, working together as a group in certain instances. And then finally, we have cognitive presence. So this is all about exchanging information, if you will. So applying new ideas, connecting ideas, uh, really to the extent in which learners are able to construct and confirm meaning through sustained reflection and discourse, right? So the ultimate goal of the community of inquiry is to build a solid foundation of social presence and teaching presence to stimulate cognitive presence in a course. That's a lot, and it is difficult. So if you're finding yourself in the space of online teaching for the first time, um, we're going to talk through a little bit later about some questions you can start to ask yourself as well as your students to identify how you are progressing in that space. And all of this together is what determines and leads to the educational experience of students, especially in an online environment. I wanted to go through that because I think that it has a lot of weight as to where we are with connecting with our students, in the last couple of months. Thinking more specifically now about formative assessment, and of course, I'm going to bring in lots of the examples that I'm talking through today for formative assessment are going to incorporate doing it in an online format. So formative assessment, again, conducted during the program, monitor student learning. The purpose is solely to provide feedback so we can shape or modify or improve the program in the moment. So examples of this, we're going to go through a lot more, but just to get our brains kind of going, is a concept map. is something like a pop quiz, an end of class reflection, a 1-minute paper, a user focus group. It's really through the techniques of formative assessment that you all as instructors and faculty members are able to give and really solicit feedback with the sole purpose of improving student learning. Formative assessment is, believe it or not just for the benefit of the students, but also for you all as instructors. So you can benefit from reviewing the information um, provided to your students to help them succeed and help them adjust their learning techniques to potentially better meet the need better potentially to better meet the needs of your students. So we can use the information as faculty members. Students can use that information to be reflective and identify areas in which they need to grow or work on specific concepts or theories as well. In thinking about classroom data sources, so if taken seriously, the results of being able to incorporate formative assessment into your sessions can really help to change the course of the pedagogy over the semester. So, an example of this might be maybe we're leaning too much on lecturing, but we could transition to more group work based on immediate feedback, right? So asking the right questions is going to help us to identify how we can shape or modify to meet the students of that specific course, which I know can sound like a lot, right? If you're teaching potentially, 6 courses and you're incorporating formative assessment and into each one, there's only so many changes you can use to shape or modify um, each one of those courses in the moment. So I encourage you all to kind of start small, maybe take a look at one course at a time and see how you might begin to implement some formative assessment techniques. But it really does get rid of the need to ask students or ask yourself, am I getting through? You should be able to tell the stage in which your students are at when you are engaging in formative assessment, and you should be able to kind of tell what theories or practices you need to go over again and which ones are pretty well solidified for the students and in their minds. And talking about pedagogy, formative assessment really creates a shift in the course organization. So there's kind of 2 ways in which courses are typically organized. They're either instructor centered or student centered. Now, as of late, I think that faculty members are focusing on kind of creating a really good balance of these 2 things, right? Instructor centered is really designed around the knowledge of the instructor. It focuses on the instructor's teaching process, and it really the use of formative assessment kind of creates the shift from it being very focused on the instructor and the course that they have set out in the syllabus and allowing it to be a little bit more student centered, whereas they're able to provide feedback to their professors, letting them know, their needs, their abilities. And really what their learning process as a student might be. So formative assessment is really kind of like an informative guidepost for teachers as well as students. So they're not tied to a score or a formal teacher evaluation, right? You all are participating in formative assessment and knowing that it isn't a part of that formal end of term evaluation. So it is a little bit more, flexible. It should be followed by corrective instruction. So as we find out and dive deeper into what students do know or don't know, we can make adjustments. And then, of course, it should be focused on really providing second chances, right, for students and instructors. Now, that always can come with a number of variables and, has to be at times handled rather delicately. But certainly when we are evaluating our students throughout the term and identifying their strengths, weaknesses, this provides us the ability to provide feedback in a non-punitive way before they are, formally assessed in a test or an exam or whatever it may be. Now, in thinking a little bit further about this shift in pedagogy, Instructor-centered usually focuses on, the instructor choosing the textbook, again, creating the syllabi, writing and revising lectures and preparing their presentations, creating ahead of time the homeworks, the exams, the assignments. Student-centered really starts with the goals. So thinking about what you want your students to take away from the course and really focusing in on those specific learning objectives and course outcomes and really designing assessments and activities off of those, both formative and summative. So taking a look at being able to incorporate a little bit of formative assessment can shift your classroom from being instructor centered to student centered. And again, I think there's something to be said for balance between the two of these. Now, this is another quote that really resonates with me about formative assessment. It says, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guest tastes the soup, that's summative. And I always liked this because it was really easy to comprehend and to understand that. And I also relate it back to course evaluations, right? So when we are looking at this quote, I hope it just kind of sits with you and is something that you'll be able to remember that isn't, incredibly, it's not incredibly technical. It isn't incredibly formed around higher ed, but is just something kind of fun and an easy way to remember the difference between formative and summative. Now we have a couple more things to go through, and then I'll take a pause for questions. But the next thing I want to talk about are the 5 factors to improve learning through assessment. So the first one is providing effective feedback to students. So really providing feedback in these low stake ways. Formative assessment is a very low stake type of assessment and way to provide feedback. It can also help to clarify and share and understand. You are helping to clarify, I should say, and to share and understand with your students the intentions and also your criteria for success. So by providing effective feedback, you are setting a standard. You are letting them know the criteria. And that is really going to help students to understand what their classroom experience will be and how their success is ultimately going to be measured. I think this always reminds me of rubrics, right? A lot of times when we're using rubrics in classrooms, we're sharing out that evaluation information ahead of time. We are typically sharing the rubric with the students so they know what's expected of them. But we also know that we may not use rubrics in all of our courses. So how are we setting the bar for success for our students? And I think that formative assessment is one way that we can absolutely do that so that they know um, exactly what the criteria is and how they're going to be measured. Now, the second one here, students' active involvement in their own learning. So more student involvement really does mean better learning, the research shows. So this could be doing things like engineering effective classroom discussions, conducting more activities, learning with explicit ask for them to provide evidence of learning. Developing effective classroom instructional strategies that are going to allow for that measurement of success. So not only have we set the measurement and they are aware of the criteria, but now we're thinking about them having a stake in their own learning. The next one is adjusting teaching to take account of the results of assessment. So this is all around, again, that summative assessment piece. It's too late to go back and make adjustments, but as another example, if we have a student or a group of students that don't pass the final exam, we can't reach out to them and help them to improve. But if we know ahead of time through formative assessment that a student or a group of students is not being successful around a certain concept, we're able to reach out and ensure that they get the resources they need to better understand exactly whatever it is that they're struggling with. Now, the fourth one here, recognizing the profound influence of assessment on student motivation and self-esteem. So really, the more students see assessment isn't just a grade or an evaluation or a judgment, but really something that can be used to chart their evolution as a critical thinker and learner, all the better, so that they are, again, kind of bought in and involved in their own learning. And then finally here, ensuring students assess themselves and understand how to improve. So when we help students find the value of assessment in their lives, when we model this, it really will help them to see, again, the value of assessment in not just your course, but in other courses and in other aspects of their lives. Now let's talk through a couple of qualities of formative assessment. So qualities. Now, this isn't just for formative. This can really be for summative too, in my opinion. But qualities might be, it could be something that's oral. It could be something that's written. It could be, it's typically more informal, but you could make it formal. I mean, technically you could do quizzes with, participation points or something like that. Um, Embedded in lesson plans, or it can be a standalone. So it doesn't have to be something that's formalized and documented in your syllabi. It can be something that you decide to kind of do on the fly, which again, spontaneous plans. It can be something that's done in a group. It can be verbal. It can be nonverbal. Um, it can be graded. It can be ungraded. I do hear a lot of area our campuses doing things around participation points. So many participation points, might earn you, an extra, 0.5% on your grade or something like that. Also, other examples here. Open-ended responses or like closed responses, teacher initiated or student initiated, brief or extended, lots of different options here. Um, Process oriented or really product oriented, depending on the environment, teacher and student, or even peer, right? So we could even think about students interacting with other students as a part of formative assessment. Now, I know we talked a little bit about the benefits when we were, you know, I don't know how long ago it was now. We've been chatting for quite a while, but it was a little bit ago. And I want to talk through again, just highlighting some benefits, not just for you all as faculty, but also for your students. So, faculty. You're able to receive data about your teaching after each class or in even each class, each unit. You can receive it each week. I mean, you could do it for every course if you really wanted to. You can see the impact of the changes that you've made in your class immediately, which will help you to spot trends and identify different times potentially in which to make changes and modifications, or even you might spot trends in the right day or part of class in which to conduct formative assessments. You can also see the changes that you've made in the course and how they affect your end of term assessment results, whether that's course evaluations or final grades or both. Now, students, it provides them the ability to communicate directly with faculty. It uses really convenient delivery options, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, and it also impacts the learning process while they are still taking the course and still engaged in the course. Now, if that wasn't enough benefits, I'm going to go through five more. And before I do, I am actually going to pause and just see if any questions came in because I realize I've kind of been chatting for a while now. All right. Looks like that we are doing pretty good on questions. Um, Now, if we move on to five additional benefits of formative assessment. So, and thinking about formative assessment, so it can help to impact a culture of continuous improvement. It has a real emphasis on growth mindset. It also helps to improve student perceptions. It helps for outcome attainment, and it really can help. And this is a highlight one. Whoops, I just went very far forward. It really can help and decrease evaluation anxiety. So this one I like to focus on. So for my experience as a consultant and my work on campus, faculty anxiety is really an unfortunate reality in the course evaluating process, as I've seen it while I was on campus, and again also as a consultant. The stakes for summative student evaluation feedback results are really reaching new heights. Right, they're tied to tenure review. They can sometimes help to establish resource allocation decisions. So it's no surprise then that as faculty members, and as we think about responding to the process with a certain amount of fear, right, rightfully so, We have found that a lot of faculty members who engage in or have incorporated ongoing assessment, formative assessment into their teaching practice, um, they have received the benefit of student feedback throughout. That summative course evaluation, they look at it a lot differently. Their focus has already shifted away from thoughts of punitive measures and unwanted surprises in favor of meaningful opportunities to develop as professionals and modify and shape their courses. So really, in turn, formative assessment activities can improve the collaboration that is, necessary between administrative and academic units to best facilitate a course evaluation process that really suits the need of not just the students or the faculty, but the students, the faculty, and the administrators alike.